situation where you feel isolated. But when you come together with other practitioners, that isolation goes away and you find out, hey, I'm not going crazy. Someone else is also having the same problems that I'm having. It takes time for information to travel to the top of an organization. So people at the bottom, they know what's going on before the top knows what's going on. Making sure that my teams are optimistic about the work that we're doing, as well as leadership is optimistic about the work that we're doing.
You're listening to the Transformed with Data podcast with Graeme Crawford, CEO of Crawford Macmillan. Graeme is here to share something he's genuinely passionate about. He's going to show you how data can completely change the outcome for both people and businesses. In each episode, he sits down with real people who've done incredible things with data. But don't worry, these aren't your typical dry case studies. Graeme and his guests bring you stories about leaders and innovators who saw something in their data that sparked a brand new reality. These are changes that tore through entire industries, upended company cultures, and sometimes even changed lives. So whether you're a data enthusiast or just curious about how to find the truth in your data, join Graeme as he discovers how data becomes more than just numbers. It becomes the spark that ignites real, meaningful change. Let's get started. Thanks for listening.
Most AI initiatives fail before they even start. Not because the tech isn't ready, but because the organization isn't ready. Today's guest knows exactly why and how to fix it. Dia Adams is a force in the world of data and AI strategy. She's the best-selling author of Winning with AI, a blueprint for corporate leaders, and has helped steer high-stakes data transformations at institutions like Bank of America, Johnson & Johnson, and even the White House itself, where she served as enterprise data strategist. What sets Dia apart is her ability to translate deep technical complexity into business outcomes that actually land. She's a rare blend of strategist, storyteller, and system builder, shaped in part by a mentorship under General Colin Powell and her relentless focus on executive alignment. In this episode, we'll cover why most data transformations stall at the top, how to get real buy-in for AI without just the buzzwords, and what it actually takes to make impossible projects succeed. This isn't theory, this is what works inside some of the most complex institutions in the world. And we're lucky to have her here today. Let's get into it. Here's Dia Adams.
Thank you for having
Welcome,
me.
welcome. It's so great to have you, and thanks for taking the time to come on today. And what an incredible resume and set of experiences you've had. Like, I'm almost stuck knowing where to start. But the clear draw in there is that the amount of time you spent within the government or looking at data within the government, and the infrastructure from the outside to me of government decision making is fascinating. And you've seen this strategy happen at the very highest levels of power. Now, most people think that the government moves slowly. That would be a fair assessment of general public opinion. But you had to make enterprise level data decisions that could impact millions of citizens, which one could argue is right, that takes a long time to do. So can you talk about the balance that comes when you're having to supply data that is going to be involved in critical decisions that have such wide-ranging impact?
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying the government does move slow. That is not just public perception. That is the reality. The government moves very slow. And that's not always necessarily a bad thing. A part of why the government moves slow is because the government has to be careful when the government makes mistakes. Unlike in the private sector, it's not just a loss of money that occurs, it can be a loss of lives, it can be a loss of public trust. And it's really hard and to gain some of the potential losses back, and some of those losses, like lives, obviously, you can't gain back. So that's a part of why the government moves slow, because the government needs to be careful and thoughtful. And one of the ways that it does that is by soliciting feedback from a broad range of individuals, and it's the coordination that requires, that takes time. We see that, just in general across the government, but it's also a feature of how data work is done. It's not going to be a situation where there's just one or two people that are making major data decisions at a federal agency, for example. We do a lot of the work as a part of working groups, where we're assembling a team of data experts from across a particular agency to provide their input on various data initiatives and governance. For the most part, I think it's a good thing that we do things that way.
Yeah, I agree. There's the balance between the speed of decision and the quality of decision is impacted, as you say, with what's at risk of getting that decision incorrect. How do you deal with the psychological pressure of that? I mean, I think in all the time I've spent in the private sector, often like when things would get a little tense and we'd feel under pressure, we'd say to like, okay, well, we're not saving lives here, or nobody's lives at stake here, and we would use that to kind of relieve the pressure. And that if that's not always available to you, so like in the cases where it's not, like how do you cope with that?
Me, on a personal level, my top coping mechanism is yoga, which I highly recommend for everyone. I do a lot of meditation. I take breaks in the workday. If something is a lot, then I breathe. I think it's important to be able to master the ability to work well in high stakes situations so that your thinking isn't impacted. You can still be clear. Um, in my personal work, it's not the most high stakes environment. I mean, there are risks and there are bad outcomes that could occur that are serious. But it's usually not in a way where, like, hey, this decision that's being made today is so super high stakes. You can't fall apart. This is work. A lot of the data work is work that's taken place over the course of years. We're working incrementally to achieve particular goals. Um, there can be regular stress that's associated with that, because sometimes we're asked to do big things. The moment we're in currently, for instance, is a very special moment for data people in the federal government, because there's a very big push for AI implementation to speed up across the government, and that requires obviously very solid data management practices.
You know it.
Yeah, so there can be, I think we're in a space where there's more pressure than usual and more eyes than usual on the data landscape. And for me, again, yoga is one. Another one is what I call data therapy. Data therapy is when data people get together and we talk about all our frustrations. And sometimes data work, it can occur in a situation where you feel isolated. But when you come together with other practitioners, that isolation goes away and you find out, hey, I'm not going crazy. Someone else is also having the same problems that I'm having. And when you're in really great groups, there'll be someone there who has overcome the particular problem, and then they can share their lessons learned. So I think that things like this podcast, podcasts are an example to me of data therapy. I appreciate all the people out there like yourself that are becoming what I call data community organizers. We really need that. As one person, I can't know everything. So it's great to have outlets where I can go to be around other data minds and find out how they're approaching things, where things went wrong and where things went well, and like how can I adapt what I'm doing based upon the new information that I'm taking in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the power community is a strong one across many disciplines, and data is no different. And I've been, particularly since starting my company a year ago, been involved in data across a whole number of new types of organization and industry, and found more commonalities than I expected. Like sometimes you get
Mhm.
those differences, like we talked about. Perhaps in the private sector, there's more of an emphasis on speed and less of speed and outcome, and less an emphasis on quality compared to government decisions. But as those balances aside, the issues around data quality and people's expectations of data, and dealing with stakeholders who make requests like, "Oh, just give me the data in a spreadsheet and I'll work out myself," without not having the context or the metadata or knowing how to use it, and not comprehending all the risks that might come along with that. Not to mention all the skill and knowledge that they're pushing to the side that's available from folks in the teams like you and I run. Um, so yeah, some of the issues are very common. And I love the yoga, meditation, breathing as a just as a good life strategy as well, like data or
Yes,
otherwise. I think that's
it's
a
a
really
good
good
life
one.
strategy, yeah. I was gonna say, circling back to what you were saying about the public and private differences, I work across both spheres and there are differences, but, I think that when it comes to the public work, I've always gained a lot by not just living in what I call the Beltway bubble, which is just, only talking to other government folks. I like to get outside of that bubble and learn about what's going on in the private sector. As we were talking about earlier, the government moves slow. And because of that, by interacting with the private sector, I'm able to sort of see into the future. On the government side, we have to deal with lots of rules and regulations, and that also contributes to why we move slow. A technology can be released into the private market, but due to existing regulations, we can't implement it right away on the public side. But I still want to know about what those things are, how they're taking shape. And it's like the private sector oftentimes is a test bed for what's going to come down the line to the public sector. So they're not, I don't see them as unrelated. I think when we're doing things well, then they're very much so related, and we should keep those communications going. I'm seeing an uptick in that cross collaboration right now due to the AI push, and I think that's a really positive thing. There's been times where I've gone to conferences that primarily focus on the private sector, and I see all this cool stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, man, we won't be doing that for 10 years." Um, and there's less of that now, and now it's like, "All right, next year, we might be
It's a little
implementing that."
closer.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a little closer. And there's a range, I'd say, within the private sector. Like, given most of my background was in a highly regulated financial services environment, where obviously speed was important, but quality is super important, right? It's not forgivable for people's bank balances or credit card balances to be off by a few cents here and there, and then that's okay. I'm sure some of your government colleagues at the Fed and the OCC and the CFPB would have a thing or two to say about that if we, sacrificed quality for speed in that particular paradigm. So you mentioned a couple of different coping strategies. I'd love to come back to this amazing piece of experience that you had, where you mentioned being mentored by General Powell. For me, at first, like military leadership thinking applied to data strategy seems like an unexpected combination that might pull out some really unexpected things. Are there any specific leadership lessons you can think of that you learned from General Powell that you applied to your work, or you applied to the sphere of data that may have come from a more military background?
Yeah, I actually apply those lessons all the time because I don't think of them as military lessons. I think of them as leadership lessons. And leadership is something that, just crosses all domains.
Especially
Um,
from a fantastic leader like General Powell as well. Like
yeah,
one of the
it really
best, right?
was. Yeah, it was an amazing experience that I was able to do that. And I'd say one of the top things is how to work well with others. Powell isn't just a military leader, he also was former Secretary of State. And I use a lot of those diplomacy skills in my data work, particularly when you have to come in to new environments. There can be a lot of politics that's associated with that. I'm working as a part of efforts that are very transformative. People have been doing data work one way, and then I'm coming in and making recommendations for how we can do it differently, or how we're going to organize data work differently. And there can be a lot of resistance when you're doing that type of work. The first thing that you need to do is you need to come in and understand the current data landscape, which means you have to get people to talk to you, tell you about what they've been doing and share their data with you. And people can be very possessive when it comes to stuff like that.
I've seen that.
Um, yeah, for a variety of reasons, it can be really hard to pry out of people what you need to pry out of them to document what's going on. So yeah, I use those um, lessons in how to work well with others. One of the things first and foremost is to listen. Um, my first interaction with Powell, I was working for a company, and everyone was very excited that he was going to be coming in, and we got explicit instructions. Everybody shut up. Nobody talk. The boss will talk, and everyone will sit around and listen and be
All
on your
right.
best behavior. And I said, "Oh, that's easy. Got it." I think, like 25 at the time, very young in my career. And when he sat down at the conference table, one of the first things he said is, "You, tell me what you think about this." And I thought, "Oh my God, the instructions were sit down and don't say anything. Why is he asking me? I'm 25. I don't know anything." And I was on the spot and I thought, well, I can't disobey an order. I've got to talk, even though I've been instructed not
Of
to. And
course, yeah.
so I gave my perspective on the particular issues. And one of the things that he understood, which really helps in government work, and I think it helps in corporate work too, is that it takes time for information to travel to the top of an organization. So people at the bottom, they know what's going on before the top knows what's going on a lot of times. So if you want to
Yeah,
cut
yeah.
through and you don't have a lot of time and you need to know what's going on here, you go talk to the intern and they can tell you some stuff. And so that's also something that I use in terms of working well with others when I'm in data environments is like I believe that everybody brings a voice to the table. Everybody has something to say. Everyone is a piece of the data landscape puzzle. So the first thing I do is I come in and I listen. I say, talk to me. What are your problems? What do you not like about? What are we not doing well here? And it gives people an opportunity to share their frustrations who um, wouldn't typically have an outlet for that. They're just, they're dealing with it. They're like, this is the way it is. It sucks, and
Yeah,
that's
this
just
is
how it's
just my
gonna
job. I
be.
have to get on with it. Yeah.
And so once they understand that, I'm not here to police, I'm here to help. I'm here to make the system better. And one of the ways that I can help make the system better is first and foremost to understand where is it broken, how is it not working, because data has to work for everyone, not just a select group of people. And how it works for everyone depends upon what their particular position in the organization is, what they needed to do. So I need them to feel comfortable speaking with me about what do you need data to do for you? How can I make your job easier? So yeah, one of those lessons is just listening, encouraging people to come to you, having an open door, not just talking to people who are high up on the food chain, but really getting input from everyone.
Yeah, I was just gonna admire, like, what better person to take diplomacy lessons from than a former Secretary of State, right?
Yeah,
The
as it gets.
a pretty critical skill in there. So, like, amazing exposure to that. And you mentioned that information traveling slowly up the organization. Like, it's something else to my experience is that information travels slowly down the organization as well. Like, unless it's a very big pattern interrupt. A former colleague of mine used to say to me, like, from a leadership perspective, you have to tell people something 7 times before you can be sure that they've actually heard you.
Hmm.
So yeah, information travels slowly in both directions. And then the other example, I think, I'm sure every person who's been a junior data person at some point in their career, certainly including me, has had this situation of, like, you've done your analysis, you pulled your insight out, and you know that the story that you've got is not the story that is wanted.
Hmm.
All right. Which is the other important thing of that. So, like, as General Powell illustrated and demonstrated as a role model so well, is like, if you open that channel of communication to the lower levels of the organization, you have more chance of finding that information out more quickly. Because,
Hmm.
as you and I know, like, from the leader's position, any thoughts of, like, oh no, I don't want to hear a message contrary to what I believe, are actually wrong, because you the sooner you know that information,
There's
the quicker you can act on it, right?
exactly.
And lead
Hmm.
through it. So
Hmm.
it also opens that channel. So I think it was great guidance for that reason as well.
You were saying some interesting stuff that's making me realize too, sort of what we were talking about earlier, the difference between public and private sector. Because, in Powell's work, if you're a poor leader, people die. So you can't afford to be a poor leader. You know, there isn't space for that. So yeah, that getting that information, you don't have time for like ego issues of like they're telling me something I don't want to hear, because you do want to hear it, because if something's broken, like you need to fix it
Yeah,
right
the
away.
cost
And
is big.
one of his things was that, you know, a sign of a good leader is someone who everyone feels comfortable bringing their problems to. So if people don't feel comfortable bringing the problems to you, you're not the leader anymore. They're off doing their own thing because they don't trust you to listen. They don't trust you to solve it. So yeah, those
Yeah.
were good ones. And the other one I was gonna say is he was a big believer in the power of optimism. This is tough work that we're doing sometimes, emotionally tough work. Any work that involves change and rapid transformation, it can be taxing emotionally. You can feel like you're running up against walls. You're trying to get a group of people all on the same page that have different backgrounds, different interests and goals. You got to get everyone to come around the table and achieve something together. And the process of doing that can be very taxing. And it can cause a data team to become demoralized and burnt out. um, we're frequently in a situation where we're these data geeks. We have all of this information in our heads. We think similarly. We can identify with one another very easily, but our work requires that we take all of that knowledge in our brain and communicate it out to other people that have different brains, that have different things that they care about, that have a
Yeah.
different language that they speak with. And I think that part of the work, it requires optimism so that you don't get demoralized, you don't quit, and that you keep communicating across various silos. So that's another one that I use. Sometimes I've worked on teams, and especially when I'm working with younger people who haven't been through as many efforts as I have, they may sometimes just get frustrated, like, oh, they don't understand, or, and I always go back to that lesson from Powell. One of his sayings was optimism is a force multiplier. Um, and that's something that I implement regularly, is making sure that my teams are optimistic about the work that we're doing, as well as leadership is optimistic about the work that we're doing.
CEOs, if you're still making big decisions based on outdated dashboard, conflicting numbers, and manual reports, then you're not leading with confidence. You're not alone. Most 5 million plus businesses have this exact struggle, and your tech stack and platforms feel like they're duct taped together. Worse, every week that goes by, you're still flying blind. And if AI is part of your roadmap, well, you can forget about it, because clean connected data is step one. So you're still in the starting box while others are running ahead of you. That's why we created the free 5-minute data maturity assessment. It's fast, it's free, and it shows you where your business stands and what's holding you back. You'll walk away with a clear score, a snapshot of your current systems, and insight into what it'll take to build a data infrastructure to support your ambition. It's the same approach I've used inside global firms like Capital One, IBM, and Accenture. And now it's adapted for fast-scaling businesses like yours. We've helped executive teams gain clarity, reduce friction, and make better decisions with the data they already have. No giant software overhaul, no disruption to your team, no data science degree required. Also, no magic wand apps that are too good to be true and sell a dream that is effectively only papering over the cracks of structural data issues. This is about giving CEOs real visibility and helping you lead with facts, not friction. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start leading with real data clarity, take our free assessment. It only takes 5 minutes. You'll get immediate insight on your current maturity and just what's possible next. Click below to get started. You've scaled your sales, your operations, your sales team. Now it's time to scale your data. I've led data transformations for some of the world's most complex companies. And now I help CEOs and leadership teams just like yours turn data into a real advantage. Let's get started. Yeah, I join you in the land of glass is always half full. So I think it's a happier place to live, and I genuinely believe it leads to better outcomes because your eyes are more open to possibilities for success than they
Mhm,
are possibilities. And that's not to say that comes at the expense of all risk mitigation and we don't,
mhm.
check ourselves and think about things that could go wrong. It's the balance of believing that things will go for the right in the end, which I think is an incredibly powerful way to exist. Speaking of powerful ways to exist and great outcomes, one of the things I read about you or discovered about you is this 600% engagement multiplication. So in your work with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, for those who are not familiar, the data catalog, you increase engagement in that data catalog by 600% using strategic storytelling. Like that's um, as I noted in my note to you beforehand, that's not just a technical win or a data win. That's a psychological win. That's a step change in engagement. So, um, a bit of background. I'm interested. Like, who are the typical consumers of that
Mhm.
data? What are they doing with it? And what magic did you um, cast to get them 600% more people looking at it?
The consumers were people within the agency. Everyone within the agency could consume the material. So tricks for doing that. One which I
And
already
what were
talked.
they? What sort of data was it? Can you share? Like, again, stop me if I'm going into confidential places. But what sort of data was it, and what were they doing with it?
Some of it is publicly available data. They could be doing various things with it. They might be contributing to education for one of their leaders of a division or something. The purpose of it was for them to receive the latest data on a particular topic that they might be interested in. Um,
Got it.
and uh, in order to drive that engagement, I mean, the first thing is one we already were chatting about, which is listening. Like I said, when I come into an organization, the first thing that I do is I listen. When I'm listening, I'm getting to know the audience. I'm getting to know what do they think is interesting, what topics do they like to hear about. Um, I want to know their data problems. Is there data that they're interested in, but they find hard to access? How can I enable access for them? How can I bring that data to the surface? I also am listening for what is their background, because these were articles that we're producing that have interactive visualizations embedded. So I want to understand um, the background of the readership so I can speak their language. A lot of people at SEC, they're economists. That's my background from college. So I'm like, yeah, I know how to speak their language. I know what economists geek out on. How do I leverage that? In addition to economists, SEC also has a lot of lawyers, and that makes for an interesting dynamic because the economists, they're fellow data people. We can, nerd out all day. Lawyers,
Yeah,
they
data
need the
cousins.
same information. Yeah, they need the same information. However, they're not as technical when it comes to data. They're just like, give me the facts. I just need these statistics or what have you. So it's also about writing and presenting information in ways that are accessible to who you want to be able to access um, the data. So, one of the things that I thought of when we were doing this work is a goal we set was I said I want us to produce Wall Street Journal quality visualizations and articles. Wall Street Journal is something
I
that
love that.
a large group of people, consumes and can enjoy from various backgrounds, but everyone's getting something from it, even though they're from a different background. So that was a part of it is like just listening to understand what are the topics that people care about, where are the existing pain points, what information do they want do they technically have access to, but are struggling to, in practice, gain the access to? And how do I facilitate that for them in ways that are digestible and easy to share with others? Is another thing. You read something you think is cool, they need to easily be able to say, hey, I read and learned this today. Check this out. It needs to be not too long. People who are higher up on the food chain, they have less time. They want information, but they need it quickly. And visuals help to communicate things quickly.
Absolutely.
Also, you want the visuals to be engaging. Data viz is my favorite aspect of data work, and I'm a little bit of a data visualization snob, I'll admit it. And so I had a lot of rules when it came to producing those visualizations and what's good enough. I want them to be perfect. I want them to be something that non-data people get excited about, because that's how we allow our work to have impact, is when it matters to people that are not like us. That's when we know that we've done a good job. So colors, being able to click around and things move around, all of that gets the interest of non-technical folks and makes them care about the nerdy thing that you're trying to talk about.
I love it. Are you familiar with the work of Stephen Fry? Stephen Few. So I went to a workshop of his in Oslo, and it was a masterclass in that very thing that you're talking
Mhm.
about, of like, are we effectively communicating this story? So yeah,
Yeah.
here's one called Storytelling with Data, one called Information Dashboard Design, one called Show Me the
Mhm.
Numbers. So
Yes.
yeah, if you've not seen this stuff,
I'm a
I can
big advocate of that type of work. I think sometimes data is sort of it's at the intersection of technology, and sometimes we focus a little bit, in my view, too much on tools and not on theory. And so I'm really big on the theoretical part of data visualization, um, which helps us to translate information to our audiences in ways that land well.
And there was a presentation I can send you a link after if you've not seen it. And it was a data viz presentation by a guy who's sadly no longer with us, by the name of Hans Rosling. And it's data about the 200 countries on the of the world, and he basically dismantles this concept that third world countries, as they used to be called, were a thing. They showed the GDP and showed the movement of countries over time, but he does it in 4 minutes, and he does it with an interactive moving visualization that's so engaging, and it just pulls you into the story, and you learn so much in such a short amount of time because his visuals are so impactful. Really love the work, and I got to see him do it live once. It's just still one of the memories that sticks with me as something to do. But of course, you need to make sure, as you say, like, as well as the colors and the presentation and using the right chart for the right reason at the right time, that a visualization that's being used by a non-data person comes with the right context. It comes with the right metadata. It comes to the level
Mhm,
of understanding such that they can't, you remove or at least mitigate the risk of them drawing an incorrect conclusion and then taking action
mhm,
on it
mhm.
as a result of the way you've chosen to present it.
Yeah, I like to say you want to allow the consumer to be able to be lazy when they're taking in the information, and that's how you know you've done a good job. They shouldn't have to think too much about how to interpret what you presented if you've done it well.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. So you've worked across a few different industries: finance, healthcare, retail, government, and we touched on this a little bit. Every industry thinks that the data challenges is unique, but as we talked about when we were mentioning community, that's not necessarily the case. What are some of the patterns that you've seen, and across all of those industries, that all the distant data cousins across different industries have in common with each other?
Buy-in as one of their biggest hurdles.
Buy-in for the work, or buy-in for the output of the analysis?
Data as a field, it's come very far in the time that I've been working in it. It's matured. We see the rise of chief data officers, which wasn't even a thing when I first started out.
Yeah.
And that role is continuing to take off. However, around that role, there are a lot of um, struggles across industry, across government, that are common, which is just justifying that this work is even necessary. Why do we need someone in that role? So yeah, I say that's one of the biggest ones. It's like I always say, data leadership is 50% technical and it's 50% psychological and around communication. um it's about working with other people, working with other stakeholders that are outside of the data group, getting them to support the things that you need them to support so that you can deliver the outcomes that they want to see. And it's that part that I find to be the most challenging part of the work. I think it's challenging One, because it's newish. I think it's also challenging because the people that are being asked to do it, it's outside of their natural wheelhouse
Yeah,
often.
yeah.
We're sitting, we're coding, we love to do all that stuff. None of that, you don't have to talk to me to do any of that. You
Leave
just
me
sit,
alone.
you
I've got my
focus on your
headphones on.
screen and you
Yeah,
vibe out. You produce some cool stuff. Or when you are talking, a lot of times you're talking to your peers, you're speaking the same language.
yeah, yeah.
But when you have to secure resources, expanded resources for that work, or you have to broaden what's being asked of that department, you see you can add value in other ways than you traditionally have been, and you have to convince someone to fund that value that you think that you can deliver. That requires people skills. And so that's something that I see that crosses various industries and government, is that people that are in those roles, they have the similar challenge of, all right, I got this great idea. I know this thing that's going to help with A, B, and C. How do I convince others to believe in me? How do I convince them to give me the mic? How do I convince them to give me um, funding? On the government side, that's made a little bit easier because we have laws. There's a law that was passed some years back that requires agencies to have chief data officers. That helps legally they have to exist. Yeah, which is um, great progress. But now that you have made that mandate, they have to get to know the role. There's one thing to say this is required. There's another thing to live it out, implement it, build that out, demonstrate that this delivers value, and all of that requires communication outside of uh, the data community. And I learn a lot of lessons when I go to conferences and things and see how people in the private sector are doing it, and powers of persuasion and whatnot.
And the right hire as well. I mean, I see this lamented regularly in the data community itself, that often big data initiatives can fail, or it can be perceived that data isn't as valuable as people thought they would, because they create this senior or this leadership data role, be it a CDO or whatever it might be called, and then hire purely on the basis of technical skill.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
get surprised when all of the other things, that those things you have to have at your disposal, that aren't there, or aren't assessed for as part of the recruitment process, suddenly come up to bite you in the bum a little bit, because you haven't hired for that skill set, and yet
Mm-hmm.
now it's proving to be critical for
Yes.
the
Mm-hmm.
success.
Yeah.
AI. We've got a little bit of time left, and I've got a AI author on the podcast today, like Winning with AI, a blueprint for corporate professionals, the book that you've written. And your book promises to cut through the hype. And in fact, you are living this yourself, like having to cut through the hype. You mentioned the pressure within the federal government at the minute to implement AI, presumably to drive efficiency and better decision making, better answers, and whatever else. What are for you? You're the person who has to do it as well as write the book about it, so it makes you the ideal person. What are some of the red flags? If there's companies out there starting an AI initiative, like what would be some of the red flags you would advise folks to watch out for that are probably going to point to probable failure of an AI initiative?
One is lack of proper buy-in at the top. I think this work requires excitement from the top, and it also requires education at the top. Leaders have to have uh, a reasonable understanding about AI and its power um, before they can implement it across the organization. To me, this is not work that is just an IT endeavor. Sure, IT is going to know the ins and outs, they're going to be really excited. But AI is not just technology. To me, AI first and foremost is business. We're leveraging
Hmm.
technology to drive business outcomes. And the best way to implement AI will differ across functional areas. So those people that are the leaders of various functional areas, they need to get to know AI, and we need to get to know their functional areas. It's a two-way communication that's occurring. And a lot of it is they have to learn by doing, they have to play around with these tools. They can't just outsource it to someone else. Hey, IT, you do it and report back to me how this works, because they have really important information that's a part of the equation, because they are the people who best understand their particular role and functional area. And we're working together to come up with strategies that allow the organization to become stronger and produce better outcomes. So that's the first thing. It's not going to go well if leadership doesn't want to participate in the process.
And do you see it the other way around though as well with AI? Like it's very easy to get caught in the hype cycle. Have you seen cases where leadership is almost too bought in and their expectations are up here and the technology is
Yeah,
actually down
I was
here?
gonna say that's number two. Two is like,
Ah,
yes, there is excitement. There is excitement, and sometimes people are excited, but they're not informed. So it's good to be excited. I'm excited.
oh yeah.
This is
What a time to be
great
alive.
times to be in the data community. I'm like, I never seen anything like it. We're so cool. I love it. So it's okay to be excited, but you need to be excited and informed. And I see some leaders who are excited and they're not informed, and that's not a good spot to be in. We
Yeah.
want folks to be excited, but we also want them um, to be intellectually engaged in the work. I was gonna say this kind of relates to my number two red flag, which is when an organization wants to decouple AI from data. AI and data go together. They're
Yeah, it
married.
doesn't make any sense
They're
to me.
hand in hand. They have to go together. And so an organization has to have um, the corporate maturity to understand that these two areas are interrelated, and they work best when they go hand in hand. You can't be excited about AI and then you want to be cheap about data. It doesn't work like that. Um, so that's my number two. Like, you have to be willing uh, to understand that it goes hand in hand. You have to be willing to invest resources into it. You have to understand that this is an emerging technology. We're learning as we're doing. We do have expertise in certain areas, but this stuff is moving very rapidly. And so the people that are helping with strategy, we know some stuff, but we're also in the process of getting to know stuff. And that requires trial and error. And in order to participate in that trial and error, we need space, we need budgets, we need resources. So I think, yeah, don't be cheap. That's what I'll say. Don't be
And
cheap,
as you say, like
leaders.
there's some new tool or technology or model or whatever it might be that comes out every week. So it's a constantly moving set of goalposts, a constantly moving toolbox, if you like. Um, and also, as you said, if that data is not good in the first place, then what great AI are you going to have from it? And also, I think there's a huge spectrum of AI, right? A huge spectrum, like it's in two entirely different things. At one end of the spectrum, and I think many companies are here, including in the private sector, of like, well, we rolled out Copilot, and now our employees can generate images for their slides and have perfect grammar and spelling. Great use case, has some value to it for sure. Completely at the other end is like, how can we utilize this first party data that we have, that we uniquely have, that doesn't exist on the internet anywhere else, that we uniquely have about our clients or our community or whoever it is we're trying to support, or our customers, whoever it is we're trying to support, and how do we harness the power of AI to dramatically uptick the product offering that we've got, or the service offering that we're delivering, or the level of
Hmm.
insight that we're delivering. Those are two completely different things, all of which
Hmm.
fall under this big AI umbrella, which, by the way, seems to have, and I think the marketers are responsible for this, not the data people, but now seems to encompass like what you and I would have known 5 or 6 years ago as basically business process automation.
Hmm.
Of like, yeah, well, we've been talking about this for years. Like, we can do
Yes,
this for a decade, but now
it's a
because it's fashionable, let's call
rebranding.
it AI.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, I think that specificity as well, for leaders or technology or data teams, whoever it is that's proposing an AI project, being absolutely clear about, what the opportunity is and what the technology is going to be deployed, and how that's
Yeah.
different from other understanding. It's still an emerging term, and what's under the umbrella versus not under the umbrella changes every day as well, right?
Yeah. And I think in order to make it meaningful, we have to start with the business, not with the technology. What problems does the business have? What strategic direction is the business moving in? And how can AI support you in moving in that direction? Um, we say firms that are AI first, but I really think it's business first. It's business first, AI second. Businesses have problems, businesses have things that they want to achieve. You talk to the AI experts about, hey, you've given me your business strategy. I'm going to recommend use cases that will complement that strategy and help you to get to where you want to go. We're not using AI just for the sake of using AI. We're using AI in specific instances because they are connected to stated business problems and goals.
Exactly. Everything has to start from there. What, Dia? I think I've just about run out of time, of your time, and I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing all that your experience and insight. I've learned so much just listening to you today, and it's this great value in community, as you said, and just for me getting to talk to you for 40 minutes or so here, and hearing how data works in an entirely different paradigm than I've ever used it has been like so informative and interesting, and as I'm sure it will be to many others. So thank you so much for thank you so much for sharing. I mentioned your book a couple of times. If just in closing, if there's any way you want to direct people towards, if people want to learn more about the book or learn more about you, or connect with you, like where should they go?
You can reach me on LinkedIn. My door is always open. I love talking about this stuff. I'm very passionate. I love exchange of ideas and meeting new people. And again, we have to get our therapy in. So reach out to me if you need some data therapy. With respect to the book, you can find it on Amazon. It's called Winning with AI, a blueprint for corporate leaders. If you have any questions or anything, yeah, just reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks so much, dear. Really appreciate you, and no doubt that we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Have a
All
good
right.
one.
Thanks for tuning in to Transformed with Data. If today's conversation gave you even one insight, one aha moment, or one new idea to take action on, do me a favor. Subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who's ready to level up. Until next time, keep asking the right questions, keep challenging the status quo, and keep transforming with data.